Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 27th, 2024. It has been 3,865 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 188 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 185 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 22 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened over the weekend and on Monday, which was supposed to be my day off, but Russia had other plans. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. There are a lot of map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 1st is unrealistic without redeploying additional assets from Ukraine. 2. As we had previously assessed, Russia has restarted its sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. The continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure are increasing the possibility of an accident at one or more of Ukrainian's nuclear power plants caused by the permanent loss of external power connections. 4. In our assessment, the unwillingness of the Biden administration to permit Ukraine to use provided weapons for strikes more than 40 kilometers from the 1991 state border with Russia has forced Ukraine to develop its own deep strike capabilities, proving that escalation threats from Moscow are hollow. 5. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a complete failure that only encourages Russian acts of aggression, including more frequent and deeper violations of NATO alliance airspace and acts of espionage in Europe and North America. 6. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia has decided to ignore Ukraine's Kursk offensive and commit all available combat power in the Toretsk, New York and Pokrovsk areas of operation. 7. Despite the new increase in operational tempo, we maintain Russia has no strategic reserve available to mount an effective defense of the Kursk region, continues to suffer unsustainable losses, and has committed almost all of its available conventional forces in Ukraine. 8. We assess the Kursk counter-invasion as strategically sound, despite Ukrainian forces lacking the resources to defend New York and Toretsk and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Selidove. 9. We maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing New York and Toretsk in 2024, and we further assess that for Ukrainian forces an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 10. In our assessment, the risk of an attack on Ukraine by the armed forces of Belarus is extremely low. 11. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 12. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 13. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. Over 22 hours, Russia launched the largest missile and drone attack of the 21st century against Ukraine, exceeding the April 13th Iranian Operation True Promise attack on Israel. between the night of August the 25th and the 26th to the early morning of the 27th, Russia launched 190 Shahed-136 one-way drones, 6 Kh-47 M2 Kinzhal air-to-surface ballistic missiles, 82 Kh-101 subsonic cruise missiles, 28 Kalibr cruise missiles launched by 4 vessels of the Black Sea Fleet, 7 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles, 1 Iskander-K ballistic cruise missile, 3 Kh-22 supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, and 10 Kh-59-69 guided air-to-surface missiles. A total of 327 standoff weapons. All of the Russian missiles and drones targeted civilians and critical civilian infrastructure, especially the electrical grid, and Ukraine had to stand alone in its defense. In the first wave, Ukrainian air defenses shot down 99 Shaheds, with 2 more crossing into Belarus, 1 entering Poland, and several lost off radar. 99 Kh-101, Kalibr, and Kh-59 missiles, 1 Kh-22 anti-ship cruise missile, 1 Iskander-M SRBM, and 1 Kh-47 M2 Kinzhal were also intercepted. At least 1 Kh-101 failed in flight, crashing into the Kyiv reservoir. In the second attack, 5 more Kh-101 cruise missiles and 60 Shaheds were shot down, 10 more failed due to electronic warfare or technical issues, and 1 entered Belarusian airspace. At the time of recording, the attack was still ongoing, with 10 Shahed-136 drones in flight. Missile and drone strikes were recorded in 17 regions, including the Sumy, Kharkiv, Poltava, Kyiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhzhia, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky, Zhytomyr, Kirovograd, Rivne, Volyn, Lviv, Ternopil, and Ivano-Frankivsk oblasts. At least 9 people were killed and 51 injured in the 2 waves, and search and rescue efforts continue. This is in addition to the 30 civilians killed and 129 wounded between August the 23rd and the 25th. Russian missiles hit the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant in Vyshgorod, causing damage to the power generation station and the dam structure. Attacks on dams are a violation of Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions. At least 3 missiles hit the Odessa area, wounding 4 people, including an 8-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl. A truck stop was also hit, destroying up to 40 civilian semi-trucks, many of them grain transporters. A woman in Odessa showed the remains of her blood-stained home. Quote, "This is my kitchen, this is my room," she says, adding that she has no more words and has to go to the hospital. A video captured the moment a Shahed intentionally struck an apartment building in Lutsk, collapsing the top floors of the structure. In the second wave, a missile struck the Hotel Aurora in Kryvyi Rih, killing at least 2 and wounding 5, with more people missing in the rubble. A woman in a nearby home described the attack, quote, "It was such an explosion. I didn't know where to go and what to do. All my windows got blown out, but my child is in one piece, and so am I. So everything is fine." Between the attacks, United States President Joe Biden released a statement declaring, quote, "I condemn in the strongest possible terms Russia's continued war against Ukraine and its efforts to plunge the Ukrainian people into darkness. Let me be clear, Russia will never succeed in Ukraine, and the spirit of the Ukrainian people will never be broken." In other news, Ukraine is still not allowed to use United States weapons for deep strikes on Russian military targets. Over the weekend, Russian artillery units and the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, attacked 50 villages and settlements and the city of Sumy, killing 4 civilians and wounding 17. In one of the attacks, a Russian Iskander-M SRBM struck a residential area on Zamostyanska Street in the eastern part of Sumy, killing 1 and wounding 6. On Sunday, artillery and rocket attacks across the Kharkiv Oblast wounded 14 civilians aged 4 to 86, including a strike on, wait, let me check my notes, the strategically important wholesale fish warehouse and market in central Kharkiv. On Saturday, a Russian missile hit the Hotel Sapphire in Kramatorsk, where journalists with Reuters Thompson were staying. Security advisor Ryan Evans from the United Kingdom was killed, and 4 journalists were wounded. An additional civilian not associated with the Reuters journalist team was also injured in the attack. And in Konstantinivka, a daytime Russian strike on the northwestern edge of Theatre Square Park killed 5 civilians and wounded 6. Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure weren't limited to Ukraine. In Ukrainian-occupied Sudzha in the Kursk Oblast of Russia, the VKS bombed the Lgov Arena, which is the ice palace, destroying the building. Now for the action report summary. Over the last 4 days, Russia carried out 626 discrete assaults, including 170 on Monday. Through August the 26th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks rose to 153, approaching the record of 159 set on July the 4th. Over the last 24 hours, separate from today's missile attack, the VKS carried out 81 airstrikes, dropping 116 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted approximately 4,500 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy. That's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Russian mill bloggers, state media and propagandists were ordered by the Kremlin only to present approved information about the Kursk Oblast, but that hasn't stopped our team. Good weather has provided near-clear sky satellite passes on August the 18th, the 21st, the 23rd and the 26th, and our team has spent hours doing geospatial analysis to understand the battlefield in the Kursk Oblast. I start in the Glushkovsky area of operation, or AO. Between August the 23rd and the 26th, Russian combat engineers established 4 pontoon bridges over the same river. A review of the August the 26th Sentinel-2LA True-Color satellite pass showed that the pontoon bridge at Karish, built between August the 22nd and the 24th, which was already partially underwater, had been destroyed. The other bridges were northwest and northeast of Zvane and east of Glushkova, in the same area where 2 other bridges were already destroyed. In Zvane, Russian troops were looting a wildberries distribution center, that's Russia's version of Amazon, highlighting the lack of discipline within the armed forces of the Russian Federation and the disintegration of civil order in the evacuated regions. A Ukrainian drone struck the electrical substation in eastern Glushkova, setting it on fire. A video which geolocated in the center of the settlement showed that the commercial area had been completely looted by Russian and Chechen forces, who tore security gates off of the windows at some shops. We'll link to the video and all of the videos and pictures I mention in our daily situation report. There are links in the podcast description. In Rylsk, social order is also breaking down, with residents complaining that humanitarian aid is not being distributed. Quote, "It's all bad, everything is missing, they don't give humanitarian aid to children, where did all the aid go?" Over the weekend, the Ukrainian Air Force bombed Russian troop concentrations in Krasnooktyabrsky with French-provided AESM Hammer precision munitions, which the Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, falsely claimed was an attack on Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian drones also continued to strike Russian troop concentrations in Kulbaki. In the Korenevo AO, Ukrainian forces took control of Krasnooktyabrsky. Armored reported that fighting in the area of Komarovka continued. Geolocated videos showed that the VKS bombed Ukrainian positions at the 344th kilometer place and Gaponovo train stations. There has been no change in the situation in Korenevo, with Ukraine holding control of the Korenevo village east of the Krepna River. Russian propagandist claims of regaining control of Vetrina, Zhebalovka and Durovka are false, with Russian prisoners taking in the latter. Ukraine also maintains control of Lgovka. On August the 24th, a Russian vehicle with at least one soldier was geolocated in the northwestern part of Crimea, confirming that Russian troops still hold part of the settlement. Yesterday, geospatial analysis of Sentinel Hub 2LA shortwave infrared or SWIR composite imaging of Crimea showed combat-related fires across the settlement. There was also a fire in Ukrainian-controlled Zhuravli. Wait, you can't see the images, but they are in the situation report with a more detailed analysis of what is shown. There is a link in the podcast description, and there's even a free 7-day trial. False color imagery showed a significant increase in artillery activity on the Crimea-Sheptuchovka road to Kalinov, which is the main Russian ground line of communication, or GLOG, that's a supply line, to Crimea. Based on the new intelligence, we adjusted the map, coding Crimea and Kalinov as Russian-controlled. In the Lgov operational direction, or OD, geospatial intelligence indicated fighting continued in the area of Sheptuchovka. There were new combat-related fires in the settlement, and false color imaging showed new artillery activity to the north and northwest. Armored reported fighting in the area of Pogribki, and satellite images suggested that Russia is using the tree lines northeast of Kireevka to conceal self-propelled howitzers or other heavy equipment. Geolocated video shared by the Russian Veterans Volunteer Corps Reconnaissance and Assault Brigade confirmed that Ukrainian forces have reached and are holding the railroad grade east of Pogribki and Mariivka. Armored claimed that Ukrainian positions in Novaya Sorochina were shelled, and fighting continued in Malaya Loknya, where up to 60 soldiers with the Russian 18th Guards Motor Rifle Brigade remained surrounded at the women's prison. The August the 26th Sentinel 2LA images showed that the southern part of the compound has been heavily damaged, the west gate has been breached, and buildings in the northern half of the prison compound are damaged. Pictures taken by Russian drone on August the 24th support the findings. That image showed all but one building south of the prison were destroyed, damage to the west wall, and fires in both parts of the compound. Based on the available intelligence, if Russian troops are still at the prison, fighting for control of the facility is likely coming to an end. Ukrainian forces were observed near Nechaev, where Armored reported ongoing fighting. This is the same area that on August the 23rd showed visible artillery scarring. Yesterday, the 1st Chechen Akhmat TikTok Brigade claimed they liberated the village of Nizhnyaya Paravaya. There's one small problem. Even Russian propagandists were left confused as no one claimed there was fighting in the hamlet. But since the Chechens insist, we moved the speck on the map into the gray area. In the Bolshoe Soldatskoe AO, a geolocated Russian video confirmed that Ukrainian forces are in Kositsa and are using the Russkaya Porечная Yuzhny road as a GLOG. We moved the line of conflict east of Cherkasskaya Porечная after Ukrainian forces were observed in the northern and eastern parts of the settlement, bringing it under Ukrainian control. Armored reported that Ukrainian positions in Mikhailovka were shelled, undercutting Russian propagandist claims that Mikhailovka was still contested. On Sunday, a small Ukrainian advance was recorded in Russkaya Konopelka, which remains contested. Russian forces ambushed a Ukrainian unit south of Ruska Konopelka at the railroad bridge over the Konopelka River, taking one Ukrainian soldier prisoner. In Sudzha, Ukrainian officials and local residents under occupation reported that Russia continues to shell the city, but the number of strikes has decreased. Russians living under occupation are starting to move more freely during the day, but remain nervous about Ukrainian troops. In one video, a Russian pensioner gives in to Ukrainian forces knocking at the gate of his home. The man opens his gate trembling and sobbing and is given canned goods for his family. Quote, "Don't cry, lie down and relax, take care, all the best to you," one of the soldiers says before leaving. Others are more welcoming, telling Ukrainian military administrators, quote, "Sudzha is Ukraine." Here is my theater-wide update for the Kursk area. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that the counter-invasion, quote, "is part of a large military political and military diplomatic operation. You will see the result later," adding that the offensive was a preemptive strike to prevent a Russian attack into the Sumy Oblast. Asked about autocrat Vladimir Putin's response to the counter-invasion, Zelensky told reporters, quote, "What is more important for him? The occupation of the territory of Ukraine or the protection of his people? And I am very glad that everything I told my partners we have now shown in practice." He still thinks about how to maintain the occupied territories and does not think about how to properly protect his people. He is now bombing his villages. Just bravo. Pictures of the crashed Russian Mi-8 helicopter that was struck by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft drone on August the 9th appeared, confirming the chopper suffered a hard landing with significant damage. Armored continues to make false combat claims, releasing a video of a Su-34 attacking what was claimed to be the Kursk area. Geolocation showed the fighter plane was operating near Maryanivka in the Zaporizhia Oblast of Ukraine. Russian propagandist Roman Alekhin warned that Russia was preparing to completely destroy the occupied regions of Kursk. Quote, "Dear fellow residents, I ask you to make a decision about evacuation today. Everyone needs to understand the most important thing. If a settlement in the Kursk region is under the enemy, it is now gone. Simply gone. During the counteroffensive, it will, with great probability, be wiped out from the face of the earth." Unquote. The acting governor of the Kursk Oblast, Alexei Smirnov, announced that access to the Kurchatov reservoir near the Kursk nuclear power plant had been restricted due to ongoing counter-terrorism activity. On the subject of KNPP, priests with the Russian Orthodox Church blessed the facility and staff, praying to keep it safe. South of the plant, Russian civilian workers are rapidly creating defensive trenches and bunkers near Kurchatov. An International Atomic Energy Agency-led team is visiting the Kursk nuclear power plant today, including Director General Rafael Grossi. Grossi said before the visit, quote, "This is an evolving situation, and it is vital when I arrive at the plant tomorrow that I see firsthand the situation and discuss modalities for further activities as may be needed to evaluate the nuclear safety and security conditions at the KNPP."
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Liptsi-Vovchansk AO, fighting continued in Vovchansk, where Ukrainian forces have made small gains. Russian troops tried to advance into western Staritsa, but were repulsed after briefly occupying a few homes. Russian mercenary Lgov Gonzo reported fighting continued in the area of Hlyboke. Following up on my podcast from Friday, because the truth matters, the localized Ukrainian counteroffensive south of Hlyboke I told you about failed, with the loss of at least 2 infantry fighting vehicles south of the contested village. Further south, in the Kupianskoe, Russian forces carried out attacks north of Sinkivka and in the direction of Glushkovsky. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of occupied Svatove, Russian attacks near Stelmachivka, Andriivka, and in the direction of Grekivka and Druzhelubivka were repulsed. Over the weekend, west of Kremenna, Russian forces advanced back into northern Makiivka. Yesterday, fighting continued in the village, and Russian forces failed to advance in the direction of Nevske, Novosadove, and Torske. Chechen Ahmad did it again, releasing a video in the eastern Serebryansky forest showing an attack on Ukrainian forces that confirmed an advance. Now let's talk about the Donbas, where we start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Beginning in the Siverskoye, Russian troops carried out assaults east and southeast of Bilogorivka, west of occupied Zolotarivka, in western Spirne, and southeast of Vyimka. There was no change in the situation. In the Kostiantynivkaye, Russian forces continued their attacks in the western edge of the canal district of Chasiv Yar, occasionally crossing the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, but remaining unable to consolidate their gains. Due to better intelligence, we made a number of adjustments to the map near Bogdanivka, Ivanivske, and Klishchiivka. None of these changes represent new territorial gains for Russia or Ukraine. In occupied Bakhmut, the Ukrainian Air Force bombed Russian positions using JDAM-ER precision bombs. The situation in the Toretsk-New York AO is complex and difficult. This would be a really good time to open up the map and zoom in to Toretsk. The Ukrainian 150th Mechanized Brigade struck Russian positions and troops along the T-516 highway in eastern Toretsk, with Russian troops 1 block east of the central city hospital. To the northeast, Russian troops remain south of the railroad tracks between Druzhba and Pivnichne. Ukrainian forces were visually confirmed north of Penal Colony No. 2, showing the limit of the new Russian advance. Ukrainian forces also retook the Terrakon in western Pivnichne and were under fire. On the southeastern edge of Toretsk, Russian units occupied the Institution of General Secondary Education No. 2. We link to all of the videos and geolocation information in the sitrep. The situation in New York has improved, with Ukrainian forces launching localized counterattacks from the industrial district. Elements of the 425th Assault Battalion Skala captured 16 Russian soldiers south of New York's Street. Based on the new information, we moved the line of conflict to the Kryvyi Torets River. We also pulled back the Russian advances from the dachas in western New York. We also pulled back Russian advances in the direction of Sukha Balka and Panteleimonovka, where fighting continued. Southwest of New York, a Russian assault in the direction of Korenevo ended in failure. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces made additional advances in the Pokrovskoye, carrying out almost 60 attacks. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Vozdvizhenka, Zelene Pole, and Myrolubivka were repulsed, and Russian forces remained in the southeastern part of Hrodivka. Further south, the situation is much worse. The Ukrainian defense of Novogrodivka is in collapse, with Russian forces reaching the center of the settlement and now 10 kilometers from Pokrovsk. The situation in Selidove has become critical, where Ukrainian troops had to fall back through open fields after the Russian capture of Mykolaiivka. Russian troops crossed the E50 highway, occupying the gas station and the mine complex north of Mikhailivka. The VKS and Russian ground units are raising Selidove and Mirnograd as they advance closer. NASA information for resource management systems indicated that fighting has likely started in Memrik, eastern Selidove, and Mikhailivka. In my August the 5th podcast, I outlined this was one of the worst-case scenarios. Russian troops are bypassing the Vovcha River from the north, and with it the settlements of Karlivka and Korenevo, causing the collapse of Ukrainian defenses from Selidove to Kurakhivka. The terrain Ukrainian forces have been pushed into is not very defensible, and the Russian commanders have concentrated their combat potential in this area. The situation is bad, very bad. In the Kurakhove, Russian forces advanced deeper into the dachas on the south bank of the Karlovsky Reservoir in Karlivka. Fighting continued on the outskirts of Nevelske, and Russian forces also remained stuck south of the Lozova River in northwestern Krasnogorivka. Fighting continued in eastern Maximilianivka, where Russian forces tried to advance toward Gostre. Over the weekend, Russian forces raised a flag in a farm complex on the southern edge of Kostantinivka, indicating a new advance to the edge of the T-532 highway. Fighting continued. Finally, in the Vuhledar, Russian forces were able to advance to the Ukrainian bunker complex just east of the T-532 highway near Vodyane and raised a flag. Further south, near occupied Volodymyrivka, Russian troops have been slowly advancing in the direction of Vuhledar. On Monday, there were multiple reports of a large Russian offensive in the direction of Vodyane and Vuhledar, but there was no evidence to support the claims. Ukrainian forces have been pounding Russian troops in occupied Pavlivka, and a Russian attempt to advance in the direction of Prechystivka failed. Here's what we know about the Black Sea, occupied Crimea, Mykolaiv and Odessa. Over the weekend on the Kinburn Spit, a small part of the Mykolaiv Oblast that is still occupied, Ukrainian drones continued to pound Russian positions, destroying another ammunition depot. The Russian VKS has been bombing Zmiyny Island, also known as Snake Island, and on Saturday the rocky outpost near Odessa was hit by 2 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles. Russia has also targeted 2 of 3 Boyko gas towers, setting both on fire. We are going back to Russia to talk about areas outside of the Kursk Oblast. Over the weekend in the Voronezh Oblast, a new long-range Ukrainian cruise missile drone hybrid hit an ammunition depot near Novaya Melnitsa. Ammunition cooked off for almost 12 hours, with Russian officials declaring a state of emergency and evacuating Novaya Melnitsa, Sibirsky and Novaya Asinovka. 2 people were reportedly injured. Ukrainian drones targeted Russian military airfield Engels in Saratov, with 1 Bober drone crashing into an apartment building. The drone attack started moments after 4 Tu-95 MS strategic bombers took off as part of the first record-setting drone and missile attack on Ukraine. In the city of Omsk, the Gazprom Neft oil refinery exploded. The blast struck the AVT-11 unit, which is capable of processing 8.4 million metric tons of crude and over 1 million metric tons of gas condensate a year. The AVT-10 unit was knocked offline in early August, also due to an explosion. Officials reported 7 people were injured in the blast and insisted that production was not impacted. Almost 24 hours after the first explosion, the plant was still smoking, with the explosion happening downstream from the distillation towers. For the 9th day, the strategic fuel storage facility in Proletarsk, Rostov region continued to burn out of control, although with less intensity. The eastern part of the tank farm has been destroyed, with the fire now burning in the southern and northwest parts of the complex. Yesterday, the Polish Air Force had to scramble F-16 fighter planes twice in 24 hours due to repeated Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukraine. Yesterday morning, 2 United States Air Force KC-135 Stratotankers supported the air defense mission, and an RC-135U combat cent monitored the area near the border of Belarus, gathering intelligence on Russian radar and electronic signals. The KC-135 Stratotanker that orbited near Lublin, Poland, came within 19 kilometers of the Ukrainian border. A Russian Shahed-136 one-way drone violated Polish airspace up to 29 kilometers deep, or 1,114,457 NATO alliance inches, loitering for 33 minutes before crashing. Operational Command of the Polish Armed Forces reported, quote, "From the moment it entered Polish airspace, attempts were made to visually verify the object in order to identify it before possible neutralization. Unfortunately, due to the prevailing weather conditions, it was not possible to clearly identify it, which prevented the decision to shoot it down." The drone is believed to have crashed in the area of Tyshovtsa. Here is my theater-wide update. On Ukrainian Independence Day, President Zelensky released a video honoring 33 years of freedom standing 5 kilometers from Ukrainian-occupied Russia.
This is what independent looks like. This is what Ukraine looks like. Our land, given by God, kissed by the sun, rocked by winds, tempered by fire, defended by its sons and daughters. This is what Ukraine looks like. Once you see it, you will fall in love. Once you visit, you will return. This is what Ukraine looks like. It cannot be confused with anything else. It can never be given away to anyone. Dear people, Ukrainians always pay back their debts, and whoever wished misery upon our land shall find it in their own home, with interest. Whoever seeks to sow evil on our land will reap its fruits on their own territory. This is not a prophecy, not gloating, not blind revenge. It is a pattern. It is justice, a boomerang for evil. And its launch began not far from the place where I am recording this address. The Sumy region, Mohrytsia, the river of Sel, a few kilometers from our border. The border between Ukraine and oppression, between life and death. The border between an independent European state and the #1 terrorist organization in the world. 913 days ago, Russia unleashed war against us, including through the Sumy region. It violated not only our sovereign borders, but also the limits of cruelty and common sense. It was endlessly striving for one thing, to destroy us. Instead, today we celebrate the 33rd Independence Day of Ukraine. And whatever the enemy was bringing to our land has now returned to their home. And the one who wanted to turn our land into a buffer zone should think about preventing his country from becoming a buffer federation. This is how independence responds. It retaliates for our civilians who are targeted by guided aerial bombs and Kinzhals, for our parents who have turned gray, for our children who are forced to study underground. For all our people who would prefer never to know the names of these cursed places in their lives, Savasleka, Olenya, Engels. But unfortunately, Ukrainians know them. That is why our enemy will also know what the Ukrainian way retaliation is. Worthy, symmetrical, long-ranged. They will know that sooner or later, a Ukrainian response will reach any point in the Russian Federation that is a source of danger to the life of our state and our people. The faded eyes of their chief perceive the whole world as a gray zone. But we will not allow to turn into a gray zone our lands where the blue and yellow flag rightly belongs. A sick old man from the Red Square who constantly threatens everyone with the red button will not dictate any of his red lines to us. Only Ukraine and Ukrainians will determine how to live, what path to take, and what choice to make. Because this is how independence works. Ukraine astonishes once again. Russia reverts once again to its repertoire. This is how the world media generally portray the events in the Kursk region. They show how Russia treats its citizens, whom it calls the population, how Russia does not abandon their own, how their soldiers loot their local shops. This is what Putin's Russia looks like in the eyes of the world. And in the same way, the entire world sees how our warriors provide water, food, and medicine to the local people, who say, "It's good that you are here now, not the Kadyrovites." This is what Ukraine's dignity looks like. Civility, the virtue of our independence. 33 years ago, Ukraine was reborn on the maps of the world, and today, Ukraine wins the hearts of the entire world. It inspires with courage. It serves as an example of how not to be afraid of Putin. And it unites the world around its Ukrainian worldview. In the 21st century, terrorists should find their reckoning in The Hague, not comfort in Valdai. And no one else in the world will say, "Where is Ukraine?" Because every continent now says, "Ukraine must win." This fuels our independence, our Ukraine. It has no lack of foreign regions. We need peace and tranquility on our lands, along our entire 992-kilometer border. On land, at sea, in the air, inside the country, wherever we stand guard for our values. Just like our warriors do. In all directions of the front line and the state border, which is symbolized by the border pillars. And our will and struggle are symbolized by our people, our defenders, our pillars. Those on whose shoulders Ukraine stands strong. It stands strong in Kharkiv, in Kupiansk, in Zaporizhia region. It stands strong in Kherson region, in Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar. On the Lyman, Siversk, Kramatorsk, Kurakova, Vremivka, Huliapilska, and Orekhiv directions. This is how independence fights. And I want to say to all our warriors today, I wish you a strong one. And thank you, guys. When the need to defend Ukraine arose, you shortly said, plus. Since then, for 913 days in a row, you have been applying a minus to the occupiers. Only you know how much effort, sweat, blood, and your extremely hard work is really hidden behind the dry statistics of enemy losses. Only you know what it really means to hold a position, what it means to be pinned down by enemy artillery and aircraft all day long, what it means to stand firm when the orcs are pushing. You have preserved and are preserving our independence. I thank everyone who helps our warriors and our state, all those who live and work to keep our independence working and living. Our medical workers, our rescuers, our firefighters, power engineers, our volunteers and entrepreneurs, police officers and farmers, railroad workers, teachers and students, all of them. Ukrainians here, Ukrainians abroad who help, find, send the necessary supplies, tell the world about Ukraine. And everyone who stays with Ukraine in the temporarily occupied territories. All Ukrainians whose strength has no borders, whose will is boundless. All those to whom I am immensely grateful. And today, and for each of the 913 days of this war, for the cause of each of you, for proving that independence is a cause for everyone, and it has many dimensions, each of which must be gained to secure comprehensive independence. This is economic, this is energy independence. This is the spiritual independence of the Ukrainian people. And Ukrainian Orthodoxy today is taking a step toward liberation from the devils of Moscow. This is also the realization of justice for the awards of an independent Ukraine, which will never again be worn by those who betrayed it. This is the realization of justice for foreign heroes who defend Ukraine on the front line and deserve Ukrainian honor, our citizenship. These are inevitable processes that have been launched by us today. This is how independence is strengthened. And there should be a solid border between us and the enemy, and there will be no walls between Ukrainians. Because Ukraine is in each one of us. Independence is in each one of us. And united, we are able to win. It was proven by February 24th. It was proven by 2022 and 2023. This year is proving it as well. We have withstood, restrained, and repelled the enemy, and now we continue to do so in their swamps. We know what independence is, how difficult it is to revive it, how difficult it is to defend it. But we know everything depends on us. We know what independence looks like. On the morning of February 24th, it was in our eyes. Today, independence is in the trenches in all directions. It is in our cities and villages. In each episode, when we find the best in ourselves, find Ukraine in ourselves, and fight for it. Independence today has tired eyes that have seen it all. Independence smiles when Ukrainians succeed. Independence is silence when we lose our people. Independence is the oath to never forget the fallen heroes. Independence tastes of smoke and dust on the battlefield and in civilian life. Independence descends into the shelter during an air raid alert to survive and to rise again to tell the enemy again, you will not succeed. You will fail. You will not prevail. And you will be held accountable for everything. This is how we feel freedom. This is what Ukraine looks like. This is what independence looks like. And this is what it sounds like. Happy Independence Day, Ukrainians. Glory to Ukraine.
Over the weekend, Belarus announced it was moving troops and military equipment to the Ukrainian border as part of snap military drills, drawing an unusual rebuke from Kyiv. Ukraine issued a message calling, quote, on the armed forces of Belarus to withdraw troops from the border of Ukraine to a distance that exceeds the range of fire systems available in Belarus. Hours later, Kyiv issued a direct warning stating that if Belarus violates the state border of Ukraine, quote, all troop concentrations, military facilities and supply routes on the territory of Belarus will become legal targets for the Ukrainian armed forces. The message went one step further, attaching a map of 17 military targets. I don't usually end the podcast with human rights and war crimes, but this is good news. On Independence Day, Russia and Ukraine conducted their 55th prisoner exchange of 115 soldiers. Many of the Ukrainian soldiers have been held in captivity for over 2 years, including 82 from Mariupol, 50 who defended Azovstal, and 6 National Guardsmen who were defending the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The exchange included 9 soldiers who Russian courts had falsely convicted of terrorism and other crimes. And that's what we know. Well, what I could share, considering the situation in Ukraine. Our writing team squeezed down 151 pages of situation reports to 28. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.